I've pulled together 3 experts to answer all your questions on CBD. Dr. Danny Baker, she's an author and a leading expert on CBD. Then Professor Mike Barnes, very, very famous in this space. And then we're going to speak to Matteo Delbruck, who is the manufacturer, the creator of Swiss Alpine Organic CBD. I promise you it's going to be very, very informative. Lots and lots of your questions will be answered, and by the end you'll know everything you need to know about CBD.
Most of the ancient old world cultures who had cannabis in their environment, everywhere from ancient China, ancient India, ancient Egypt, they all use cannabis medicinally. We have this in the archaeological record. So this is not new. We are not reinventing the wheel here. We're just really rediscovering a really old medicine that was used for everything from epilepsy to pain to, eye problems and childbirth, labor problems when they didn't have much else. And
CBD stands for cannabidiol, and it's one of over 100 so-called cannabinoids that are found in the cannabis plant, and actually a few other plants as well. But there's 133, I think, at the last count of these, and CBD is but one of them. It is probably the second most researched cannabinoid. Its cousin, if you like, is called THC, which is probably familiar to many people because that's tetrahydrocannabinol, which is the cannabinoid that gets you high. It's the one that recreational users seek, and sometimes medical users. So the two main cannabinoids in the cannabis plant are THC and CBD.
We grow in a greenhouse and outdoor. We don't grow indoor. Indoor and greenhouse, outdoor are completely different things. Greenhouse or glass house is basically the same as growing outdoor, just that you have a roof above the soil to be independent of the weather. And we don't use artificial lights. We use sunlight in the greenhouse as well. Because we believe it's more natural than growing hemp in pots, which grow through artificial light. That's the main difference.
Those are great questions. And those are, of course, some of the first questions people want to ask me, because most of my patients who I prescribe medical cannabis for, a lot of them are over the age of 60. They've never smoked cannabis in their life. They don't want to get high, and they're really worried about it. So first of all, let's start with THC. So THC is what we call the most common, the most well-known psychomimetic part of the plant. The reason we say psychomimetic, even though it's even more crazy to pronounce, is it means that it can, alter your level of consciousness. It can make you feel high or stoned if you have a lot of it and you don't have any CBD to counter it, and if you're not used to it. So that's on the THC side. The CBD, that is one of the many, many chemicals in the cannabis plant that it actually is psychoactive, because anything that has an effect on our brain is technically psychoactive. So CBD does help with anxiety and stress and all kinds of inflammation, pain, all these other wonderful things that it does. So it is psychoactive, but it is not psychomimetic, meaning it won't make you feel high or stoned. So it's very, very safe. And that's one of the reasons why you can find it over the counter here without a prescription. Now,
so focusing on CBD, it doesn't get you high, that's the first thing to say. And indeed, it counteracts the effect of the THC. So in medical terms, if you take some CBD, you don't get high on the THC.
For our extraction, we only use a certain part of the plant. That's why also we harvest by hand, manually. So we don't use big machines which grasp basically everything which is on the soil. We just want to use certain parts of the plant. Basically the plant part which have high CBD concentration. For example, stem or the big leaves, they don't have any cannabinoids. So we remove them manually, and we just extract from the very small leaf around the buds, around the flowers, and we use this content kind of for the extraction. And
So CBD is very safe. It does have, like any medicine, it has some side effects potentially, but they're generally very few and very well tolerated. It can cause a bit of dizziness, for example. It can cause a little bit of tummy upset occasionally. It causes a bit of sleepiness sometimes, but of course that can sometimes be what the person wants. Can promote sleep, and it's from its medical benefits point of view. It has a number of very interesting properties. I'm sure everyone has heard of the case that was made for medical cannabis in the UK in the back part of 2018 with children with epilepsy, particularly Alfie Dingley. He was a child that had several hundred seizures a month, in hospital every week. Cut a long story short, his parents went to Holland. They tried the effect of CBD in Holland and they stopped his seizures. Then they made a big media case to come back into the UK and make it legal in the UK. But it's from its medical benefits point of view. It has a number of very interesting properties. I'm sure everyone has heard of the case that was made for medical cannabis in the UK in the back part of 2018 with children with epilepsy, particularly Alfie Dingley. He was a child that had several hundred seizures a month, in hospital every week. Cut a long story short, his parents went to Holland. They tried the effect of CBD in Holland and they stopped his seizures. Then they made a big media case to come back into the UK and make it legal in the UK. So it has anticonvulsant properties, and it's now used for several children and adults in this country as an anticonvulsant, anti-epilepsy pill, if you like, or oil. What else does it do? It helps sleep for those who have difficulty sleeping. It's very good at calming anxiety, so that's why it has a role in what you could call wellness. It's a calmer. It balances people. It takes away a little bit of the ups and downs of life, you could say. But it's
So let's start with cannabis. So cannabis is the Latin name of the plant Cannabis sativa. There's also subspecies, but the wider species, the full name is really thought of now as Cannabis sativa. So hemp and marijuana are Cannabis sativa. Hemp, that's the second one we'll focus on. Hemp is a variety of the cannabis plant that's been bred over the years to have very low THC, and it was really bred for fiber. So it was meant to make rope and in fiber rather than be producing these large flowers on the female plant that had lots of resin, lots of cannabinoids that were high in THC that were used for hashish and for recreation. Marijuana is a term that's usually used for high THC recreational cannabis, but it's not a technical term. It was actually a Mexican slang word that really started being popularized in the 1920s. And actually, I personally don't like the word marijuana because it was part of a very racist, very anti-Mexican, anti-Black campaign, it really by the powers that be in the US in the 1920s, 1930s to really kind of blackball cannabis as something that was used by minority groups, that was going to corrupt white youth. And some of the history behind it is quite shocking and horrendous. So I think for myself, I don't like to use marijuana because of that reason, because of its historical connotations, but it's still widely used in the recreational community.
We use CO2 extraction. And the reason why we use CO2 extraction is because we believe that's the best possible way to produce a high quality product. And it's the most natural way to produce. It's eco-friendly and it's a very efficient method. So we extract with quite low temperature, but high pressure. And this allows us to ensure that we keep all the active ingredients like the CBD, CBG, other cannabinoids, or the terpenes, that we are able to keep them active and they are not being destroyed by the heat of the extraction. And since we use CO2 as a solvent for the extraction, We don't need any ethanol, and we can guarantee there are no solvent residues in the final product. So CO2 extraction, I think, we believe it's the most natural way to produce a high quality cannabis extract.
Our bodies have what's called an endocannabinoid system. And what that means, very briefly, is that in our brains and the rest of the body as well, particularly in the immune system, we have receptors on nerves called cannabinoid receptors. There's two of them definitely, CB1 and CB2, and probably others. The body produces natural chemicals that link onto those receptors. The chemicals are called anandamide and 2,8-G. So that everyone has that. Every animal has that except insects. Every vertebrate animal has this endocannabinoid system. We know now, over the last few years, what our own natural endocannabinoid system does. And it does the things, not surprisingly, that the cannabis plant will do in medical terms. It can help modulate pain. It helps what's called homeostasis. It keeps a sort of balance in the body. It has basically a master controlling role of all the body's nerve functions. So it has really a key role in keeping us stable and sane, I suppose you could say, and pain-free. It has a whole role in not just brain functions, it has a role in immune functions, in bowel functions, in heart functions, in reproductive functions. Every function of the body, the endocannabinoid system has a sort of master controlling role over. And all the plant is doing with its cannabinoids is interacting with our own cannabinoid receptors in our body. So it's supplementing or modulating our own inbuilt endocannabinoid system in a nutshell.
And would it be fair to say then that some people don't need CBD because their system's working fine, or does everybody benefit because it enhances, or do some people have a weaker cannabinoid system, therefore taking the oils or the medication, whatever, actually works?
Well, that's a good question. We know that there are some people who have a rather deficient endocannabinoid system, and they're the people who will benefit most from adding to that from external cannabinoids from the cannabis plant, for example. We also know that the cannabis as a medicine doesn't work for everybody. Like any medicine, you'd expect that. It's not a wonder drug. It doesn't help 100% of people who take it. And it may be, it's an interesting point, but it may be that those people are those that have a perfectly good, fully functioning endocannabinoid system, and they don't need that extra boost or modulation from the external plant. That may be one reason. But there's certainly some disease states that are probably, almost certainly, caused by a deficiency of the endocannabinoid system. And that's things like migraine, anxiety, bowel problems like irritable bowel syndrome, possibly things like fibromyalgia. There's a lot we don't fully understand, but almost certainly there are some diseases in man that are modulated through a deficiency in the endocannabinoid system, and therefore will be helped when you add to that system by the external cannabinoids from the plant.
And is that...
Cannabis, because THC and CBD are such biologically active molecules and they work directly with one of our own systems in our bodies called the endocannabinoid system, that may be why they have a more potent effect than some of these other herbals. Certainly, it's the most potent herbal that I use clinically in my practice. There are some others that come close for certain things, but as far as the diversity of what you can use it for, really cannabis is quite unique. And the reason why is because we have receptors for cannabinoids from plants and also from our own endocannabinoids that we make in our own body naturally in every organ of our body and all throughout the brain and the nervous system.
Explain that, because that's always confused me a little bit. So CBD stands for cannabidiol, is that right?
Cannabidiol, yeah.
Cannabidiol. And we have these endocannabinoid systems within our own body. Is this one of the reasons why? Because when people first say, well, how can CBD work? How can it be good for anxiety? How can it be good for depression? How can it be good for pain? How can it take away knee pain joint? How can it make you sleep better? People are claiming it does this, that, and the other. And yet, it's not just anecdotal. I've heard this from so many different people saying it really does work. is part of that reason that it touches it's good for so many different ailments? Is that because we have a almost parallel system within our own body?
That's exactly correct. So we didn't really know much about the endocannabinoid system until 30 years ago when it was discovered. Before then, we didn't really understand how cannabis worked in the body. We knew that THC had an effect on the brain, and so did CBD, we thought, but we didn't really understand it. And since that discovery 30 years ago, unfortunately, it's now just beginning to trickle down into medical school teaching. So that's why most doctors didn't quote unquote believe in cannabis, because they had never been taught that just like we have a stress cortisol system, just like we have hormone systems, just like we have an opioid system, an endo-opioid system, we have a system that can process and respond to cannabis molecules. And we make our own endo, or inside of us, cannabinoids naturally. So that is exactly why these compounds can do so many things. For example, the reason why we can see CBD having an effect on anxiety is it actually targets some of the areas in the brain that deal with the stress response, in the hypothalamus, for example, that kind of turns on and turns off the cortisol response. CBD, we think, plays a role in that part of the brain. And it also plays a role in our immune system in basically counteracting through many, many different pathways, inflammation. So that could be joint inflammation. It could be inflammation in the intestines. If you have inflammatory bowel disease, the list goes on and on. And CBD, unlike THC, doesn't bind to one of those receptors tightly. It just kind of floats around, and it's like a balancer of our system. This is how we think that it works. It works through a number of different, what they call second messengers and orphan receptors. So we don't even really understand the whole picture yet, but we understand enough to know why these things have such a diverse biological effect.
And, people, when you say what cannabis can do, people will say, well, that can't be right. It must be a bit of a snake oil. It must be a big placebo. How can it possibly help Crohn's disease on one hand, anxiety on the other, and epilepsy on the other, and pain on the fourth bit? So people say it can't do all those things, but actually, when you know that it works through the endocannabinoid system, which has a role in every bodily function, then it makes sense that the cannabis plant can help all those different sort of disease states, because they're modulated through the same endocannabinoid system.
Complex it is a hard to explain concept. Basically, what you can think of is the endocannabinoid system is like a skin. It sits on top of the dopamine system, the serotonin system, all these other systems, and it can have an effect on helping to keep the balance. The overall goal and mission of our endocannabinoid system is to keep homeostasis, so to keep balance, to keep the peace in this sense. So people who might have an endocannabinoid system that's not functioning normally might have a much bigger response to CBD than someone who is very healthy and very well balanced in their endocannabinoid system. And even people can have completely different responses to THC for a similar reason. So it's a very complex way that the endocannabinoid system and cannabinoids interact with those other neurotransmitters, but they interact with our serotonin system. They do interact with our dopamine system, and the list goes on.
No doubt in my mind, and there's reasonable evidence now to back this up, that the plant works better as a whole plant. Because the plant has 133 cannabinoids. It also has terpenes in it, which are the thing that gives plants, and cannabis particularly, its smell. It has over 100 of those. It has about 100 flavonoids, which are things that give plants their color. You add all those up, and there are, that's 333 plus other bits and pieces, different components. And all those components that have been tested so far have some medical properties. So we know that the whole plant is better at its medical job than the individual components of that plant.
Yes, so as most people know, in cannabis, you have a lot of cannabinoids. There are different kind of cannabinoids. There's CBD, CBG, and others. But there are other active components or organic components of the hemp plant which are important, like the terpenes. There are more than 100 kind of types of terpenes. And terpenes also have certain health benefits. like anti-inflammatory, or can reduce pain. And the terpenes are also the ingredient which gives this unique flavor to the hemp extract, to the CBD, and this goldish color as well.
Terpenoids, or terpenes, as many people know them, are the parts of the plant that give the plant its aroma. So terpenes are in all plants. So when you smell a rose, if you smell an orange, you're smelling the terpenes. When you smell a lemon, the lemon scent comes from a terpene called D-limonene, and there's other ones in the lemon plant that match up completely with what's in cannabis. So these are the plant chemicals that make it smell really nice. They attract pollinators in the natural world, and what they do in our bodies is really interesting. They're also biologically active, and some may even be psychoactive, so they cross over into the brain. For example, we have D-limonene, which might boost our limonene or limonene. It's the same thing, depending on how you pronounce it. But it can potentially boost mood, we think, in the preliminary research. And again, this is in very, very high doses, but it's maybe contributing to that effect in certain strains of cannabis that are high in it. Then you have strains that are high in something called alpha pinene, which is a terpene that may help with memory and focus, and help decrease the short-term memory impairment people get with high THC. And we have one called myrcene, which is a really calming terpene. So when people sometimes buy a hemp extract that's really high in myrcene, one of the strains that they've used to make it, they can often feel sleepy and almost like they've had a little bit of THC sometimes. And the reason is it's when you look at the profile, if you put that extract through a laboratory machine to check what's in it, it's usually high in myrcene. So it's really good for the evening, for calming down, using before a meditation practice, that kind of thing.
And so that's the terpenes or terpenoids. What about the flavonoids? Do they sort of antioxidant properties, as in other sort of flavonoids that you get from other plants, or?
Absolutely. So the flavonoids, just like you've already alluded to very, very wisely, they have antioxidant properties. They give the plant its color. And some of the flavonoids, including one called quercetin, which is in apples, may even have antiviral effects. Quercetin is being studied right now in a study in China for its potential antiviral effects, potentially for COVID-19. It's a very preclinical study. Certainly, we can't say that quercetin has effect on COVID-19 yet, but these are some of the ones that are being studied, and quercetin is also one that shows up in some strains of cannabis. So again, you have hundreds and hundreds of compounds in this one plant. And that's the beauty of botanical medicine, because botanical medicine doesn't work like a drug. It doesn't hit just one receptor and have one effect that's very linear. Instead, it works on many, many different pathways in the brain and the body. They work together. They work in harmony, these things. And when you combine them together, it's almost like having a whole herbal family of herbs in one plant, in the cannabis plant, because there's just so much in there.
Once we separate the part of the plants we want to use for the extraction, we remove the other parts which we don't want to use for the extraction. We use them as a fertilizer for the next year. So we have a closed circle. So we use everything from the plant. We don't have any waste, and which again is important for an organic way of cultivating and producing hemp products.
Alfie Dingley and his parents changed the law, and it was really them and a media campaign around them, and the law was changed on the 1st of November 2018, that allowed doctors, at the moment only specialist doctors, that's doctors on the GMC specialist register, that's basically hospital consultants and not GPs, but they can prescribe cannabis for any condition. Now, mainly it's used for pain, sleep, anxiety, epilepsy and a few other things, but it can be prescribed for any condition. I'm a neurologist, and my interest in cannabis goes back about 20 years. when I was doing multiple sclerosis clinics in Newcastle, where I live. And at first, a couple of people came and said they were using cannabis that helped their MS pain and spasticity, muscle spasm. So very informally, I asked everyone coming to the clinic, and about 50% of people in that clinic were using cannabis illegally for their medical symptoms. So I thought there must be something in it. Then by chance, I was asked by a company called GW Pharma to help them develop their first cannabis medicine called Sativex, which is still available and useful for the management of spasticity and multiple sclerosis and other conditions. Then nothing much happened because that wasn't widely prescribed. Then about 2016, I was asked to do a report for the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Drug Policy, and we produced, my daughter and I actually produced a report that I think was fairly useful in guiding the way that cannabis should be legalized in the UK. And then around the same time, or just after that, I was asked to assist the family of Alfie Dingley to get a license for him, and he ended up being the first person in the UK to get a cannabis license after the parents had been to Holland and had remarkable effects on his epilepsy from legal prescription in Holland.
So the entourage effect is another way of thinking, really specifically to cannabis. It's a term that people came up with just for cannabis, for talking about the herbal synergy effect that we talked about earlier. So in cannabis, people were starting to notice that different strains had different properties. If you had one strain that was quote unquote a sativa, even though sativa versus indica doesn't really mean anything anymore, technically, which I can get to in a second, but let's just say for the purposes of this conversation that someone was going to grow a sativa that was, I don't know, a certain variety of cannabis, or they gave it a name like lemon haze because it tasted lemony. And they realized that it made them feel a different way than maybe an indica, like an indica that they grew, and it made them feel more relaxed versus their sativa that was really lemony made them feel more uplifted. So what people started to notice in the recreational community was different strains were leading to people feeling different, and they weren't sure why at first. And the reason why is because all the different terpenoids and plant chemicals and other minor cannabinoids besides THC and CBD also play a role in what is called the kind of the herbal fingerprint, if you will, or the herbalists, the non-medical herbalist community would say an herbal energy signature of that plant, of that variety. So really, it's just another word for herbal synergy.
Over the counter remedies. What are the main reasons people turn to CBD or the full entourage? What was the phrase we used? The full spectrum CBD. What's the main reasons people are turning to that today in terms of what is it relieving?
So from a wellness perspective, I think one of the most common things is stress and anxiety. If someone's choosing like an over-the-counter CBD product, sleep is another reason, although CBD on its own doesn't necessarily make people feel sleepy. It doesn't work like a sleeping pill for most people. But if you have a strain that's high in myrcene, for example, it can make people very relaxed. And of course, if you suffer from anxiety throughout the day, and that's why your nervous system's ramped up and you're not sleeping, and you take some CBD, your nervous system will just kind of come back down to normal by the end of the day, and you'll be able to get to sleep a little easier. So these are the most common reasons. The other really big common group of people who use CBD are people who have inflammatory type pain, like arthritis pain, that kind of thing.
For cats, cats have difficulties in digesting or breaking down the terpenes, and this may cause discomfort or even liver or kidney damage. And that's why for our CBD oil for cats, we extract or remove the terpenes and make sure that we have a safe product for cats as well. So there's a difference between a full spectrum extract and a THC-free broad spectrum extract and CBD isolate oils. So we have three different kinds of variations. The full spectrum extract includes all ingredients or all active components of the hemp plant. So CBD, CBG, CBN, terpenes, but also THC. For our THC-free broad spectrum, we take basically the full spectrum extract and we just remove the THC while keeping all other active components of the plant. And then if you would just extract the CBD and you would just remove everything else, you would have a CBD isolate. You don't have anything else in there. And we believe that not only CBD is important and has health benefits, but also other components like CBG or CBN or the terpenes. And they work well in combination, and that you have a higher impact or more health benefits if you cover all the ingredients of the cannabis plant.
We know that there are some people who have a rather deficient endocannabinoid system, and they're the people who will benefit most from adding to that from external cannabinoids from the cannabis plant, for example. We also know that the cannabis as a medicine doesn't work for everybody. Like any medicine, you'd expect that. It's not a wonder drug. It doesn't help 100% of people who take it. And it may be, it's an interesting point, but it may be that those people are those that have a perfectly good, fully functioning endocannabinoid system, and they don't need that extra boost or modulation from the external plant. That may be one reason. But there's certainly some disease states that are probably, almost certainly, caused by a deficiency of the endocannabinoid system. And that's things like migraine, anxiety, bowel problems like irritable bowel syndrome, possibly things like fibromyalgia. There's a lot we don't fully understand, but almost certainly there are some diseases in man that are modulated through a deficiency in the endocannabinoid system, and therefore will be helped when you add to that system by the external cannabinoids from the plant.
And is that probably why, because normally when you have obviously this is not a drug, this is from nature, but when somebody makes a chemical drug, a pharmaceutical company, they normally target one specific thing. And that's why I was always finding it difficult when people tell me why CBD is so helpful, in that they'd reel off a whole list of things. And that is because of the cannabinoid system in the body. Is that sort of a fair sort of understanding? Or?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And people, when you say what cannabis can do, people will say, well, that can't be right. It must be a bit of a snake oil. It must be a big placebo. How can it possibly help Crohn's disease on one hand, anxiety on the other, and epilepsy on the other, and pain on the fourth bit? So people say it can't do all those things, but actually when you know that it works through the endocannabinoid system, which has a role in every bodily function, then it makes sense that the cannabis plant can help all those different sort of disease states, because they're modulated through the same endocannabinoid system.